Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men Annual number 9, cover dated 1985, and this is part 2 of a two-part story that began with New Mutants Special Edition number 1, written by Claremont, illustrated by Art Adams, who's also the artist here of this second part, and it's Art Adams's first X-Men Annual. He does 4 of them. And this cover here is pretty remarkable because it's an homage to the cover of Journey into Mystery number 83, which was the introduction and first appearance of Thor at Marvel Comics. So this homage cover by Art Adams, and inked appropriately enough, given that he was the chief creator, writer, artist on Thor at the time, inked by Walter Simonson. And note the crowded corner box here with both the X-Men and New Mutants featured. So let's open this one up to our first page, and we've got a pretty cool opening page with our dramatis personae. We've got the X-Men here, Phoenix, Cyclops, Storm, Colossus, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat and Rogue. We've got the New Mutants here, Warlock, Mirage, Karma, Magic, Wolfsbane, Magma, Cypher, Cannibal and Sunspot. And we've got this nice little title piece here, this dragon, and we've got Lockheed here as well on the corner. There's No Place Like Home, creative team, Chris Claremont, writer, Arthur Adams, penciler. And we've got 3 inkers here. We've got Al Gordon, Mike Mignola and Art Adams inking himself as well. In the New Mutants Special Edition, the inker was Terry Austin, so obviously not available to do this issue 2. So pretty cool opening page here, title page. And our letterer is Tom Orzechowski and Petra Skotese, colorist. So let's open this one up. So the way that this opens is that Kitty Pryde has a nightmare, or so it appears, and she screams in the middle of the night, and this wakes the X-Men at the X-Mansion, and Nightcrawler teleports Rachel into Kitty's room, and Rachel uses her telepathic powers to project a vision of what Kitty is experiencing in her sleep, and this is pretty cool. So we see this vision of Illyana here in her demon sorceress Darkchild persona, and we've got images of Loki, Enchantress and Storm looking pretty much like a god of thunder as well. So the events here take place in terms of X-Men continuity and chronology between Uncanny X-Men 199 and 200. So the New Mutants, it turns out, were on Kyranos under the tutelage of Ororo, and Loki decided that he wanted to abduct Ororo to Asgard so that he could turn her into his version of a goddess of thunder that he would use to replace his half-brother Thor, and would use in his schemes to become the ruler of Asgard now that Odin is dead. So that's what's happening here. The art here by Art Adams is just hyper detailed. It's difficult to see here, but he has depicted the New Mutants captured here behind Darkchild. Very difficult to see it in the annual itself, because some of these pages are suffering from the flexographic printing process. Some pages are sharper than others, and that was a defect of that printing process, that sometimes you just didn't get a good looking printed page, and ultimately that technology was superseded. But the place that you can see this well is if you have an Essentials black and white edition. You can see the detail here, but it made me wonder whether Art Adams was drawing twice up, because the level of detail is just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. You can see it even here, the X-Men rendered in the background of this panel. We have got Nightcrawler, Wolverine, Cyclops, Madeline, Colossus, Rogue, in such detail there. Painstaking work by Art Adams, really not scrimping on anything in this issue. I must have had a lot of lead time too in order to get it all down on paper. And so the X-Men put together that their problem is that the New Mutants who were vacationing on the Greek isle of Kyranos, something must have happened to them, because there's a freak gale has evidently cut off all contact to the island, no phone, no radio, neither boats nor planes can get near the place. So Colossus asks, is it a coincidence? And Wolverine, is skeptical. So what happens is Cyclops decides that they're going to go after the New Mutants to rescue them, and he figures that they're in Asgard. So what he uses here are these lightning bolts that were created by Archon the Empyrean to teleport himself between dimensions. He taught Scott in X-Men Annual number 3 how to use them, and so Scott is of the belief that the right combination will take them to Asgard. Now Madeline is heavily pregnant here. This is before she gives birth. At the end of Uncanny X-Men 200, and she's worried about Scott leaving her, and she says she understands that he has to go after the kids because they're counting on him. And then what happens is they're all suited up and ready to go, and last person to arrive in the room is Rachel, and they're all shocked when they see her. And why is that? It's because she is in her new costume, something she proclaimed at the end of Uncanny X-Men 199, that she was taking on the name, mantle, and powers of the Phoenix, and so she's dressed with the Phoenix design. And this shocks Scott because, of course, as he says here, your stylized bird image, it's the same as the Phoenix symbol worn by Jean Grey. I'd appreciate you're wearing something different. But Rachel doesn't. And so they get set to go to Asgard. Scott uses the lightning bolts and away they go. And just interesting here, some foreshadowing here, because this same month and the next, X Factor number 1 will come out, and of course we'd have Uncanny X-Men 201 coming shortly. And Madeline here says, goodbye Scott. Oh Lord, why all of a sudden am I so afraid I'll never see him? We'll never be happy together ever again, she wonders. And Kitty left Lockheed in Madeline's keeping while they're away trying to rescue the New Mutants. And then we get this strange little scene here, which is set at the X-Mansion. And the colouring indicates this purple, magenta, pink colouring, that something bizarre is going on. And really what we're seeing is Magma's vision of something happening, something odd happening at the X-Mansion. She's created this fairy figure, and Storm compliments her on it. And Roberto Sunspot wonders, mutants are more and more hated with every passing day. Nothing we say or do to change that seems to make any difference. Sometimes, my friend, I think I would trade everything I have for a place in a life where I'm accepted for what I am. And this all plays into what subsequently occurs in the rest of this issue. And here we see Rain concerned about Danielle Moonstar, and we also see Danielle worried about her role as leader, but suppose I'm no good, suppose I fail. So she's eaten up with doubts. And here we have Ileana and Doug out sunbathing by the pool, and we've got Warlock there as well. And Warlock's concern is with being safe, keeping himself safe. And Ileana there talks about how, you know, she doesn't feel whole when she hasn't access to her sorceress powers, which are virtually non-existent on Earth, and anywhere they do work, their nature turns her to evil. So they're all basically eaten up by various kinds of issues and emotional concerns. And here we see their clothing beginning to change. Rain here talking about how she wants to love and be loved. Aurora, how she wants to fly again. And Roberto wanting to live somewhere, a land where we can do all of that, where we can at last and forever be happy, the home of the gods, Asgard. But Magma isn't convinced. She says here, how can this be? We never said such words. This moment never happened. And then Sam Guthrie arrives. And I like the way that Art Adams draws Sam here. We've got a little screen tone use here in the background as well. We can see just how tall he is. He's the tallest of the New Mutants, a real beanpole. And we get this transition to where they really are. So Amara has been sleeping and dreaming. And here she is waking up in one of the 9 realms, as it turns out. And Sam is with her. Because in New Mutants Special Edition, the New Mutants weren't part of Loki's plan to bring them to Asgard. He only wanted Aurora, but because she was in charge of the New Mutants, he tasked Enchantress to bring Aurora to Asgard. Enchantress agreed, but in the middle of things, the New Mutants ended up in Asgard too, but split up across the 9 realms. And where Magma and Cannonball are is the Forge, deep within the heart of Nidvalir, realm of the dwarves, where the master smith Etri works his wonders. And what he's doing is he's forging an Uru hammer, and using Magma's power here, she's become a fairy or elf, and is losing touch with her humanity. And they are forging this Uru hammer for Loki, who's going to give it to Storm. And Cannonball has a plan whereby they'll go along with it up to that point. They'll hand over the hammer, but they will also, in that moment, rescue Storm. That's the plan. And Etri has taken a shine to Cannonball, and he gives him this special armor and sword. He says the mail is proof against any blow, any weapon, and this blade will cleave through all, save that which lives. And that is going, that is going to prove handy later on in the annual. So then we pick up with the arrival of the X-Men in the Golden Realm in Asgard, and they happen just at the moment that a wolf is being killed by these trolls. So Wolverine doesn't like that, and he jumps into action here, popping his claws, and all the X-Men get involved to help the wolf. And it turns out the wolf is a shapeshifter, a shape changer, and but he's being grievously injured. And who arrives except Hela? And she arrives to claim him for to bring him to her realm, Hell. But Rachel intervenes. Or rather, before that happens, Hela bids special greetings to Rachel, which is interesting. She says here, I bid thee welcome to the Golden Realm, Paladins, that's the X-Men, especially thee, Star Soul, Firehair. Thy pedigree is written on thy face. Thou art in truth much like thy dam. You knew my mom. Yea, verily, we were the bitterest of foes. Yet in her time she sent more souls unto me than any who professed to serve my cause. So a reference to Phoenix killing destroying the planet of Debari and the 5 million sentient beings who died there. So a nice little reference there. And Phoenix, of course, Rachel protests that it wasn't her mother's fault. But Hela's glad to know her. Mayst thou be all thy mother was, and more. So this is, foreboding, ominous, because, as I said, Rachel has taken on the mantle of Phoenix. So there's an implication, well, is she going to be as destructive a force as Dark Phoenix was ultimately? So a little bit of kind of like dramatic foreshadowing tension there by Claremont. And then we switch scenes, and we've got this Falcon that is flying about, as it turns out, returning to Loki and being watched or surveilled even higher above by Warlock, who has taken on the form of a bird, something like a pterodactyl actually here, and is observing and beaming back images to the New Mutants, who at the end of the previous issue defeated Enchantress and Illyana, as Darkchild sent Enchantress to Limbo, where she's been imprisoned by Sim. And back here in Enchantress's fortress, the New Mutants are working away on learning Enchantress's secrets from her grimoires or books of magic. So Doug is deciphering those using his mutant power to understand all languages. And Illyana here in her demon sorceress form is becoming impatient with him, and that aspect of her personality is becoming more to the fore as she makes some cutting remarks about Doug and how he wants to be with Warlock because on your own you're as helpless as a baby. But Danielle, Moonstar, intervenes, telling Illyana to back off. But Illyana is getting kind of nastier and more aggressive as time wears on. And then we pick up with Loki and the arrival of the Falcon, and he's spied Warlock, even though he doesn't know what Warlock is, and he uses his bow and arrow to take out Warlock, and they lose the signal from him, and Danielle decides to go after him. She has, in the previous issue, acquired this winged horse, Brightwind, and later on in this annual it becomes confirmed how her identity is somewhat changed, so we'll talk about that in due course and why she's got this winged stallion. And so she heads off, Doug goes along with her, and this leaves Illyana, Rain, and Karma alone with Illyana in the Enchantress's fortress. And then we pick up with Loki and the Falcon on his arm, who it turns out was Aurora all along, that he had transformed. He had given her Freya's cloak of golden feathers, which transformed its wearer, Aurora, into a falcon. So, in this scene, Loki asks Aurora whether she's happy, and she says yes. In Asgard, it's a land thou couldst come to care for and call thy home. I already love it, she responds, as I do no other. And what of your companions, the X-Men? Do you not miss them? I always shall, but my time on Earth is done. They have no real need for me, she says. But from all you have said, there is great need here, and Loki I wish to help with all my heart and soul. So he says her will be done. And so in his thoughts we learn that his plan is proceeding apace, that he's mixed a touch of magic, the slightest of spells, with Storm's own yearnings to bend her completely and of her own free choice to my purpose. With my help, Aurora, thou shalt succeed my half-brother Thor as goddess of thunder, and then with thine aid shall Loki at last become ruler of Asgard. So that's really what he's up to in the course of this story. Then we pick up with the X-Men back in the forest. This is really nicely done here. The light and shade, the spotting of blacks from the campfire, and we can see it throwing shadows here, the rocks and the shrubs and bushes. It looks very well in black and white, but it looks good in color here too. And Rachel uses her power to telepathically look into the mind of the unconscious shapeshifter and sees that he's been following the trail of his beloved. He's a prince, and his beloved happens to be Rain of the New Mutants. So Scott says here, talk about star-crossed romance, and he would know. At least this confirms Kitty's dream. We're on the right track, and we learn later on in the issue who was responsible for Kitty's dream, but not yet. So Cyclops decides as leader that they'll split up into two teams. He's going to sell Wolverine, Shadowcat, and Phoenix into the city in order to reconnoiter, and the rest of them are going to go after Reign. And this is an interesting little series of thoughts that we get from Kitty here, where she says, "We don't dare talk openly to Rachel because she hasn't told Cyclops who she really is, which is so dumb and so sad, and she won't use Psy speech. She's the loneliest person I know, and she seems to want it that way, in that she's so much like her dad. He heard Hela, he must know who Ray is, but he hasn't said a word." Interesting character bit here, and interesting implication of Rachel's personality, her kind of closed attitude, being akin to Cyclops's, who is supposed to be her father, yes, or is her father. And then we switch to Rogue getting some costumes for Wolverine, Phoenix, and Kitty, so that they blend in when they go inside the city. And of course, these costumes are fairly out there, especially Wolverine's, and he insists that Kitty not make any jokes about it. And then they have a little kind of heart-to-heart here where Kitty's afraid of dying. Wolverine says, he's not scared of death, never the going, only how I go. And that's going to prove relevant later on in the issue with something that happens to him. And then we pick up with Sunspot, who is really enjoying himself in this tavern here. He's surrounded by these beautiful Asgardian women who are determined to be his lover. But then Danielle Moonstar arrives, and what happens is everybody in the tavern's extremely afraid of her, including these burly men as well. And that mystifies Danny in terms of what's going on and why they're so fearful. And even Doug says here, it's weird, definitely weird, the way that the Asgardians are responding to her. So it's kind of like a slow reveal in terms of her new identity. And then they find Warlock. So this is who they've been after, and he's damaged there by Loki's arrows. And what happens is when he catches sight of Danny, it strikes real fear into him, and he starts to attack her, and he grabs Doug and runs off, and we still get this developing mystery about for the New Mutants in terms of how these Asgardians are warriors are cowed with a look from Danny, and they're wondering, like, what is the meaning of all of that. And then we pick up with the other X-Men team under Cyclops, and they're following the lead of the Wolf Prince, who has tracked Reign's scent to the Enchantress's fortress. Really nice panel here. And so he races off to be reunited with Reign, and there they are running around each other. And this shocks Reign because, as she thinks here, when I saw my prince, I couldn't help myself. I became my wolf self. I acted like an animal, but I'm not. I'm a girl, a human being, aren't I? And remember, though, in Magma's dream, she wanted love and to be loved, so she's getting her wish somewhat here. And then everybody enters into the Sanctum Sanctorum of Ileana, who's now presiding over the Enchantress's fortress. And Colossus is shocked because, as he thinks to himself, she sounds so much like herself, but there is an aura about her that terrifies me. It must be my imagination, and yet. So Ileana gets ready to cast a spell to zero in on Aurora, and her plan is to nab Storm and be gone before Loki suspects. But it's too late, because even as Cyclops cries out a warning, Loki arrives, and he attacks the X-Men, which ultimately will lead to their imprisonment. But then we switch back to the city, and it's still damaged after events in Thor 351 to 53, when the city was attacked by Surtur. And here Warlock is dying, and so Doug proposes to share some of his life force with Warlock, and this is their blending for the very first time. And it stuns Doug what he sees when blended with Warlock. And that's something that will develop in later issues of New Mutants and beyond. And then we go back into Asgard, the part of it that wasn't destroyed or that has been rebuilt. And we've got our little trio of sneaky X-Men continuing their surveillance, and Wolverine catching some real familiar scents. So then at this point it turns out that Cannonball and Magma are nearly at their destination with the Uru hammer, and Magma's worried about whether she'll ever get her humanity back. She says here, when first I saw this land and its people, I thought it so wondrous. I yearned to stay here forever. Now I have my wish. But there's a sense in which she may be regretting that wish. And then we get back to, here we have a reunion, or we have Wolverine finding Sam and Magma, and then the scene switches back to the Enchantress's fortress. And this again is a hyper detailed anchor panel here with the captured X-Men, Illyana, Loki. There is a lot of detail in this, and you won't really see it too well in color, but in the Black and White Essentials edition, just the level of work, the level of detail from Art Adams is stunning. What happens here is with the X-Men shackled and Illyana involved in it, Loki determines to call upon a rock troll that he is going to send after the free X-Men, and he has these collars of obedience that he puts on Rain and her Wolf Prince, and so he's going to send these after the X-Men and the New Mutants that are still free. But here in the background, Nightcrawler is struggling against Illyana's enchantment and uses his mutant power of teleportation to get free. And this is a great little sequence here where he wraps his tail around Cyclops and kisses Rogue, and this allows Rogue to use her mutant powers to in fact absorb Cyclops' power and Nightcrawler's of teleportation, and she's able to use Cyclops' optic blast to blast Loki. And but Loki then starts to struggle with her, and who intervenes, shockingly, except Storm. And Storm, because of Loki's magics, doesn't see Rogue as we do. Instead, she sees her as a creature of evil in this panel. So we get her point of view on Rogue. And then Loki's able to use the distraction to ensure that there's no more mischief and the X-Men are locked up once again. But Ororo is a little bit unsettled, and we see her looking back, so some doubts have been sown. And then we switch back to Asgard, and we have Danny and Doug flying over Asgard. If I had to guess who was responsible for inking this particular page, I would go with Mike Mignola. Not 100% certain, but that's my guess here on this page because of the spotting of blacks. And so we have the surveillance X-Men team hooking up with the free New Mutants. And then we have this intriguing panel where Danny sees a spirit face looming over Wolverine, and she's wondering what the heck is going on. It's a mystery for the moment. And then the ground beneath them opens up, and it turns out that the rock trolls and the two werewolves, Rain and her wolf prince, are facing them. And so, again, the level of detail here is unbelievable, and it gets a little muddy with the colouring here, not reproducing too well on the page, much clearer in the Black and White Essentials edition. And so we have a fight here, and it turns out that Etri's gift to Sam, the sword that will cleave through anything except flesh, is powerful enough to cut off the collars of obedience and this frees Rain. And just at that moment arrives Douglock, so Warlock and Douglas combined, and Warlock taking on the shape of the Enterprise starship from Star Trek. So pretty fun sequence here, and image from Art Adams, tremendously detailed. And then we have the rock trolls deciding to retreat and finish these mortals another time, because they have what they were looking for, which is the Uru hammer, because he needs that for Storm. And in the middle of everything, Wolverine was bitten, and he is in trouble from that dragon bite, and has been very badly injured. Kitty thinks here his healing factor must be handling things just fine, but he's under tremendous strain, as it turns out later in the story. And then we have a decision whereby Rain is going to be used to track the other X-Men that are Loki's prisoners. And Rain is petrified that she'll be captured. And then we get this pep talk from Kitty, who earlier had been afraid of dying, where she says, "I know you're scared, Rain, me too, but you can't let that beat you." I guess this is the hardest part about being an X-Man or a New Mutant. We can't live normal lives. We can't run away from problems or threats or bad guys, no matter how terrible they are. We have powers. You're special. Because of that, people depend on us. We can't fail them, Rain. We won't. So again, a twist on the common Marvel Comics theme, going all the way back to Lee and Ditko's Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. And then we go to the Hall of Heroes in Asgard, and we have Loki giving a big speech to the survivors who fought the war against Surtur, and he talks about the loss of his revered father Odin. But no less valiant than we Aesir were those sons of Midgard who fought by our side. Their forms compared to ours are frail, and their lives as fleeting as the morning dew, yet their glory shall outshine the stars. It is of one such I speak tonight. And so he's working up to introduce Storm as goddess of thunder. And the X-Men are there incognito, X-Men and New Mutants. And then we switch back to the Enchantress's fortress, and we have Karma using her powers to try and break Illyana's spell of imprisonment. Back to the Hall of Heroes then. We get this little moment of tough talking from Wolverine to Sunspot, because Sunspot is more or less happy to stay there in Asgard, and Wolverine tells him, says to him, "That's what you're after, Bobby, the glory. No fun being a star if there's nobody to applaud. You've no right to talk to me that way," says Sunspot. "You're not my father." "True, I'm a man doing my job, and you're a boy chasing a fool's dream. Roro isn't here because she wants it. She was kidnapped, same as you kids. And she no more belongs than you. The difference is you got a choice. I don't even know why I bothered talking. I guess cause I thought you were worth the effort. My mistake. It's your life, Sunspot. You're free to make any kind of mess of it you please. Aurora's who I care about and who I'm going to the wall for. And we can see the effort it's taking him to stay upright as the dragon poison works its way through his system, and his healing factor is struggling to deal with it. Great image here of Wolverine's face with the sweat and the determination and the pain on it, as he thinks here, cause there's nothing you or anyone can do. Got to stay on my feet just a while longer. Once the job's done, then I can let go. And then we have the arrival of Cannonball with the sword, the enchanted sword, at the Enchantress's fortress. And it turns out the X-Men have been freed, but Colossus is still under some influence of Illyana's spell because of their family connection. But Cyclops emerges from the shadows to blast Colossus just in time to save Cannonball. So there's no time for any of them to waste. They need to get to the Hall of Heroes to thwart Loki's plan and to help rescue Aurora. So Loki introduces Storm in the Hall of Heroes, and we have the Uru hammer here, and yet it's a mite too late, as Douglock grabs Magma to prevent her from breaking through the rock and making the hammer available to Aurora. And then Wolverine jumps after Aurora, but he is in tremendous pain from the effect of the dragon poison. And this guy's about to set on Wolverine when it turns out his pep talk, tough talking with Sunspot, has had an effect. Sunspot bops this guy in the face and then gets involved on Wolverine's behalf. And so Loki summons the rock trolls to fight on his behalf, and he uses his own powers to get the Uru hammer from the rock, and he presents it to Aurora, and Wolverine on his knees implores Aurora not to take the hammer. So what will she do? Let's turn the page and find out. Okay, she grabs it. And we can see the look on her face, because of course during this time period, because of events in Uncanny X-Men 185, Storm no longer has her powers, and grabbing the hammer, she gets her powers back again and command of the Storm, which is what she deeply, truly wants. So quite a stunning page here by Art Adams, very dynamic. And so we've got Loki delighted, his plan is coming to fruition, but Wolverine is determined to talk with Aurora and convince her not to go along with Loki, because as he says here, he's the god of lies, that's all he does. Now this particular page is quite blurry, or this panel, because of this flexographic process. It's blurry here, blurry down here. Really wasn't great technology at the time. So, you know, like you get very different quality printed pages. These two are pretty good actually, this one in particular, but that previous one not so good with those blurry panels because of the process. So then Hela arrives to claim Wolverine's hero's soul, and this makes Aurora think twice. And Danny gets involved, and this is the point that Hela says, "You are a Valkyrie, one of Odin's warrior maids, his choosers of the slain. Thou shouldst be standing by my side to aid me, not keeping me from mine appointed task." So now the penny drops for Danny, that she is a Valkyrie. Is that who my friend missed and her sisters are or were. They were characters she interacted with in New Mutants Special Edition #1. But Danny decides to slay Hela, which of course is not going to prove possible on her own. And Hela blasts down Danny and Brightwind. Meanwhile, Aurora is wondering about what she's done. And Wolverine says to her, Aurora, whatever Loki offered, no matter how wonderful, wasn't for you, but for him. He's using you. So, this Wolverine's words get true to Aurora. And she decides that Hela will never have Wolverine's soul. And so she uses her power over the storm to defy Hela. And then everybody gets in on the action. So we've got Cyclops there using his optic blast, and Phoenix getting involved too. And just at the point that Hela's probably going to go crazy and maybe kill them all, the Valkyries en masse arrive. And that's the point that Hela thinks otherwise. She thinks that she needs to husband her strength to match it against that of Thor, because he's going up against her in issues of Thor around this time, 361 to 362, as it says in the editorial note. So she leaves, but she swears that she'll meet them again and that the last laugh will be hers. And I like this little detail. Loki all the while has been hiding under the table, and now he determines to argue with Storm about whether she's going to stay with him and accept a place of glory amongst the gods. And at this point, Kitty gives him a piece of her mind and tells him, you can't catch us all. Sooner or later, somebody will reach Thor or Balder or Heimdall or Freya or the Warriors 3, and poof go your precious ambitions to be big boss here, and maybe a whole lot more. So either you call it quits right now, you send us home with all curses lifted and no more vendetta, or we scatter. So Loki's amused by the fact that Kitty is threatening him as he sees it. And then we have this interesting bit at Norn Keep, where the Norn Queen Karnilla is working a scheme of her own against Loki, and reveals here it was she who enabled the witch child Ileana to touch her soulmate's dreams, that's Kitty's, mine own eldritch might, which enabled the X-Men to cross the cosmic gulf from Midgard. She's not ready to confront Loki openly, but more than willing to hazard these mortals, the X-Men, as her cat's paws. Their victory is Karnilla's, and in the fullness of time, come the All Thing, the gathering of the immortals, our new liege, that is Odin's replacement, shall be a man of my choosing. So this is the big power game that's going on in the Nine Realms at this time. And the X-Men have just been cat's paws in Karnilla's hands. So then we switch back to Asgard and we get our denouement, our climax. Loki agrees to send the X-Men and New Mutants back to Earth, but there's a condition because he's a god, and with the gods there are always conditions and taboos, and he says, any powers, gifts, enchantments you've gained here shall be stripped from you. And yeah, so the exception turns out to be Karma. He's going to leave her in her thin or ordinary form, as he says here. However, I'm not so ungracious as to condemn thee, Karma, to the gross form that was thine on Midgard. That was what Amal Farouk, the Shadow King, did to her, where he turned her into an obese person. Thou may retain thy beauty. So when Karma returns to Earth, she has gotten her old form back. And then it turns out Danny's going to have to be separated from Brightwind, but Mist, this Valkyrie, intervenes and says, by Odin's law, horses and rider may not be separated once the bonding has been made. And she threatens Loki that the... Yes. Nevertheless, Valkyrie, my will is adamant. That is to say that Dani can't remain behind. She has to leave, and Brightwind can go with her. And Mist says that, take thy stallion with our blessing, a place will ever be set for thee at thy table. So Dani will remain a Valkyrie when she returns to Earth, which is, Claremont setting up some potentially interesting storyline down the tracks. And then, of course, attention turns to Aurora, who is Loki's goddess of the storm, and he makes one final offer to her to stay, be a goddess, rule Asgard by his side. And she says, sweet words, a tempting offer, O Lord of Lies, but Asgard is not your realm, Loki, and I shall be no party now or ever to making it so. And so she uses her power over the storm one last time to melt down and destroy the hammer, which he casts to the ground. And this angers Loki here. But he says, okay, gather thy brood, woman, and get thee gone. But he's impressed by her. It would almost be worth losing the throne to win her to my side, he thinks to himself. So then they get ready to go. Incredibly detailed panel here with all of the X-Men and New Mutants. And we also have this touching farewell between Rain and her Wolf Prince. And then Loki casts a spell. To thy mentor, Professor Charles Xavier, I send thee. And as the editorial note says, for that story, see X-Men 200. So the X-Men are supposing to end up in England, where Professor X is, but they turn up in Paris, and we see that towards the beginning of Uncanny X-Men 200. And so the Valkyrie leave, and then we have our final page, where Loki's kind of in a bit of a foul form, that his scheme has not come to successful fruition, but he picks up the remains of the Uru hammer and uses his power to sculpt a memento of Storm as goddess of the storm, and concludes with this soliloquy: much was gambled and much lost, but the great game continues. I endure, and tomorrow's another day, and a mortal has nothing if not time to plot and scheme and try again. I will yet have my way in all things. Asgard shall be mine, and who knows, perhaps a queen. Until then, fair Aurora, this shall be a sweet something to remember thee by. And so it ends. 48 pages of Adam's art, his first X-Men annual, not his last. And I do hope that you enjoyed this commentary and review on X-Men Annual number 9. If you did, please like the video. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.